Good afternoon once again, friends. So now we will start with our second session on the fourth day of this 6-day AICTE QIP FDP on 4D printing for smart manufacturing. So I hope my audio and video is okay with you. Uh,
Yes, sir. Perfectly fine, sir.
okay, thank you, Manisha. So today the topic of discussion is predicting dimensional accuracy. This prediction is, I'm sorry, let us correct it now. Okay. So it is predicting dimensional accuracy in FDM 3D printed parts. So now it's the fourth day of this program on 4D printing, and I am sure that all of you are well aware of the 3D printing or additive manufacturing. Many of you must be knowing it already in great detail. Many of you must be knowing it maybe superficially, but I hope that by now everybody is familiar. So my this session is not exactly related to that what is 3D printing or how it is done, but my session is that how we can apply machine learning in predicting dimensional accuracy of parts which are 3D printed using fusion deposition modeling. But still, for the first 3-4 slides, I will just give you some basic information, some statistics about 3D printing. So this work which I am presenting was carried out by my ME student, Mr. Rahul Bansal, last year only in December 2020. And along with me, Professor Jitendra Madan from Chandigarh College of Engineering and Technology was his co-supervisor. So additive manufacturing is the process of joining materials to make objects from 3D model data, usually layer upon layer, as opposed to subtractive manufacturing methodologies. It enables fabrication of customized products with complex geometries. So we don't have to make any dies or something like that. So any shape, practically any shape we can make. Then 3D printing is also now, you see it is basically carried out in so many materials. So it's available in metals, in polymers, in biomaterials, and luckily our institute has all the three type of machines. The first one we purchased was for a polymer. It was a U-print machine. Uh, Manufacturer is Stratasys, and it uses only ABS, acrylene ethyl butadiene styrene. Then this we purchased in 2011, and then in 2000, I think 18 or 19, we purchased the metal 3D printer that is manufactured by 3D Systems, and it can make parts of practically any metal like steel, titanium, aluminium, nickel, etc. So recently we have purchased a bioprinter, so which works on biomaterials. So this biomaterial is that it uses a bio ink, which is a liquid mixture of cells, matrix, and nutrients. So nutrients are required to keep the cells live. So once a part is made using a bioprinter, then it is supposed to be used in a living thing, like maybe a human body or the body of an animal. So once it is implanted there, then it will get its diet from the human blood. Additive manufacturing is supposed to grow at 25% during this current period of 2020 to 2025. There are different types of additive manufacturing techniques. The photopolymerization, which is commonly called as SLA or stereolithography apparatus. So where you have a photopolymer resin, which is cured through light, selective exposure to the light. Then we have powder bed fusion, which is commonly called as selective laser sintering. So our machine is also a selective laser sintering, or you can say direct metal printing. So here we have a metal powder, which is with the help of a laser. It is selectively, you can say, sintered. Then there is a binder jet technology, which uses a liquid bonding agents, which are selectively applied onto thin layer of powdered material to build up parts layer by layer. So there it is, it's a binding agent that is applied. Then there is material jetting, where droplets of material are deposited layer by layer to make parts. So this is similar to what you can say a printer that we use at our home. So there we do it only in one plane. Here we do it in the third dimension also. Then there are some, you can say, maybe you can call them old, or you can call them the primitive ones, like a sheet lamination, where sheets are laminated layer by layer. So sheets of material are stacked and laminated together to form an object. Then material extrusion is material is extruded through layers. So this one is FDM, of course, that is the plastic one, polymer one. So it is perhaps the most common. Most of the open source printer that you will find today are FDM based. Then we have direct energy deposition. So it is a powder of wire is fed into a melt pool, which has been generated on the surface of the part, where it adheres to the underlying part or layers by using an energy source such as a laser or electron beam. So and then there are hybrid types. So where people combine different type of techniques. So today our talk is basically limited to FDM. So just showing you a basic FDM printer. So where you have a bed on which the part is to be made. The bed can move in maybe X and Y directions, and the head through which the material in the form of plastic at the plastic stage is extruded, it is heated, and it comes out of the head, will then move in the Z direction. So there is, of course, a cooling fan is required. Then these are the rails on which the head will move. This whole bridge will move up and down. Then there is a filament of wire on a roller. So from where it is fed to the hot end. Maybe you can see it's white in color. So, and then from there it comes out and the object is made. And then there's a display also. So the main parts, because these are, as I said, the FDM printers are most commonly available open source printers. So nowadays students also, they buy the kits and assemble them. So it will consist of stepper motors or DC servo motors, which are required for print bed motion, print head motion, as well as the extruder feeder movement. Then there are position and proximity sensors for homing. Homing means that when the machine starts, the bed must be at a 0, 0 reference, and also the head must also be at a 0 reference. Then for auto bed leveling also. And then there are temperature sensors which are required to control the temperature at the hot end from where the wire or the filament comes out. So before we proceed further, let us see just a 4-minute video. It's a very good video which shows you the whole of the process. Maybe you have more like this before and during this course. So however, I would like to show you this.
Introducing Speechula, the most natural sounding text-to-speech software on the market.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to 3D Now. My name is Jack, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to 3D print an object from start to finish.
Because it will show you the complete process from the 3D CAD model to the end.
So jumping right into the video, the first thing you guys need to know about 3D printing is the 3D printing process. So I showed this slide in another one of my videos, The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to 3D Printing, and this shows the main steps in the 3D printing process. So of course, the first step in 3D printing an object is your idea for what you want to print. So there's two ways to get an object to print. The first one is to find it online at a website, either Thingiverse or My Mini Factory. Those are the two most popular ones. Or you can make it yourself by CAD modeling your object. So there are many different CAD programs that you can use to make an object. Some of the ones that I like are Tinkercad, Fusion 360, and SketchUp, but there are much more that work also. So once you have your 3D model or your object, you want to get that file in a .stl format, and that's what most printers use to print an object. So once you have that STL file, you want to download a slicer software. So again, there are many different slicer softwares, but the ones that are most popular and I like are Cura and Simplify 3D. Cura is free, Simplify 3D is a more advanced program, but it does cost money. So once you download your slicer software, you're going to import your STL file into the slicer software. So once your model is in the slicer software, you're going to add your printer settings to the software. So you will add your nozzle size, your pins, the temperature of your filament, how fast you want to print, support, infill, things like that. If you want to learn more about slicing, I'll link a video below. Once you have your sliced object, you're going to export that or save it as a .g-code file for most printers, or a .microbot file, or what your printer uses. And you're going to save that to an SD card or USB drive, whatever your printer uses, or if you want, you can print through USB connected directly to your computer. So once you have that .g-code file or .microbot file on your SD card, you're going to bring it to your printer. So the first thing you're going to want to do is replace the adhesion material on your bed. So some printers use glass beds, some printers use painter's tape beds. You're going to want to make sure you have the optimal surface to print your object on. Next, you're going to want to preheat your bed and nozzle. To go into the settings, you preheat it to the exact temperature that you have in your slicer. Once that's done, make sure your printer is calibrated. You don't have to do this every single time, but it helps to get consistent and nice, perfect prints.
So
to
now
calibrate your printer, I also
on.
made a video on this, which I'll link below. On every printer is different. Some have auto calibration, but on my printer, I move the nozzle to every corner of the bed and calibrate each corner until the nozzle is the right distance from the bed. So after that, you're going to want to load your filament into the printer. So you put your spool on a spool holder or wherever you have to hold your filament up, feed it into your extruder, make sure some plastic is oozing out, make sure that it's primed and ready to print. So once all that's done, you're ready to print your object. So navigate through your printer's menu and select the object you want to print. So once you start printing, you're going to want to make sure the first few layers are perfect. Once those are correct, you're pretty much good to go, but you might want to check it every once in a while and make sure it's working out fine. So once the object is finished printing, you're going to want to take the filament out of the printer and store it in a plastic bag so oxygen doesn't get to it and make your filament brittle, and it'll last longer as well. To get your object off the bed, you're going to want to use a paint scraper or some sort of prying tool to stick under the print and pry it off the bed. So once that's done, you're going to want to cool down your printer and shut it off. Make sure everything's nice and cool. And you have your final object printed out. So I hope this video helped you guys out. If it did, please leave a thumbs up on this video. It helps me out a lot. Please subscribe.
Okay, so there were so many things this video showed us that the guy showed you that you could download a file from the internet, or you can make a CAD file, then convert it to STL format. And then he gave you a glimpse of a free slicing software, that is Cura. So he used it to generate the layer by layer model. So based upon which the machine code will then drive the printer motors. And then he set some printer settings in the software. Like printer settings means he set was like what is the height of each layer, what is the temperature, and what is the infill density. So these kind of things. So these are some important parameters. And then he showed you that auto homing, then leveling. It was not auto leveling. He did the leveling himself. So he moved the print head to each corner of the XY table or the bed, you can say, and then used a sheet of paper as a feeler gauge to see that the head is just slightly above the bed. So then from the software he selected the model which was to be printed, and then the printing was carried out. So the FDM process parameters can be many. For example, build orientation is the first one that we normally take here, because depends, we would like to have a orientation in which we have minimum, or you can say minimal hanging parts. Then infill pattern, raster width, air gap, infill density, layer thickness, print speed, and extrusion temperature. So build orientation is shown here. For example, if a tensile testing specimen is to be printed, you can print it. It is shown here in 3 forms. Like here it is lying flat, here it is lying on its side, and here it is vertically up. So depending upon the geometry of the object, you can check it in the software only. The software will also suggest you that which orientation is better. There are now optimization software which will optimize the orientation themselves. Then you have the infill patterns. So infill patterns can be linear or rectilinear, diamond shape, hexagonal, and concentric. Then the raster width. So raster width and air gap, 2 parameters are mentioned, but basically raster width and air gap, you can say combined, they will decide what is the density. So density was mentioned as separate parameter, so they will decide what is the density. Because as you will see in some of the videos that we have made in our laboratory for this work, that the shell is of course always solid, but inside you don't make a solid object, because that leads to unnecessary wastage of material and increasing the weight of the object. However, this I am saying if you are doing it for a hobbying purpose. But if it is the component is going to withstand some stresses and strains, and obviously depending upon the requirement, you have to decide what should be the density, what should be the orientation, etc., etc. So many parameters are important. Now when we make an FDM part, so some of the response parameters which we might be interested in is, like for example, surface roughness, dimensional accuracy, build time. You want to reduce the build time, flexural strength, compressive strength, or tensile strength. What kind of strength you want and up to what level, that depends upon the application. Surface roughness is also important from application point of view. Dimensional accuracy is of course important. So there are different parameters which will affect which will affect a response to some extent. So in this work which I am showing you, we were mainly concerned with the dimensional accuracy and not concerned with surface roughness or other parameters. So prediction of dimensional accuracy is important because it's an important property, one thing for the functioning of the part. So FDM process parameters have significant impact on dimensional accuracy. So because FDM, as I said, that these are the most of the open source printers, so they may not be that much accurate. If you buy a, say, 20 lakh printer and if you buy 50,000 printer, so obviously the quality of the motors, the quality of the sensors will not be that good, the rigidity, so the accuracy is not going to be same. So prediction of dimensional accuracy can help in deciding the optimum process parameters, so that is where it helps. Now the FDM printer that was used in this work was a 3D printer called model RXP 2200. The software used was Idea Maker and the material used was polylactic acid. So polylactic acid is one of the most commonly used filaments in 3D printing. Advantages are it is biodegradable thermoplastic made from corn starch and sugarcane. It is resistant towards warping and there is no necessity for a heated bed since the room temperature is enough for the printing process. So the printing temperature is 180 to 230 degree centigrade. That means at this temperature the wire will come out of the hot end for printing. Whereas the build platform temperature between 20 degree to 60 degrees is also okay. So in India, this is in summer we have a temperature up to 45, 48, and even in winter, in northern India, the temperature is low. By just keeping the room shut and having a heater near the printer, you can have this build platform temperature in this range. Otherwise, the FDM printers, which are accurate ones, which will use typically ABS, so there the whole chamber is maintained at a room temperature at certain required temperature along with the build platform temperature. Now, how part fabrication was done using FDM. So as you saw in the video, the first thing was the CAD model design. So we will show you shortly what was the model which was used. Then conversion to STL format was just a simple step. You save the file as a STL file. Then setting the machine, then building the part, and then part removal and cleanup. So this was the part that was used. So you can see it has two types of features. One is hole, the second is the protrusions. And again, the hole are of two types. One is square, one is circular. Similarly, these prisms you see, this is square and this is cylindrical. So these are the part features. So you can say these are the, for example, square cavity and cylindrical cavity. So their dimensions are shown here. So square cavity is 8 mm of each side and the height is around 10 mm. Similarly, cylindrical cavity diameter is also, I think, 5 or 8 mm it was taken. Then there are square and cylindrical protrusions or these prisms, and then the base of these sides are there. So the input parameters taken were 4. So there were, you can say, 4 factors and 3 levels for each. Layer thickness, infill density, print speed, and infill pattern. So layer thickness was 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3 mm. Infill density in percentage, print speed in millimeter per second, and patterns of 3 types: lines, rectilinears, and concentric. So line and rectilinear is not much different, but there is a slight operational difference. Then what were the output parameters, or you can say response? That were dimensional measurements of length, breadth, and height for square and cylindrical shapes, or you can say the sides of the cavities. Now when we talk of machine learning, the input parameters are called data and the output parameters are called a label or labels if there are more than one. So once the CAD model was prepared and saved as a STL file, so it was given to the slicing software where it was the complete code is generated. So it shows here time 0 hour 49 minutes 18 seconds, filament 5 gram, filament is required, estimated price is this much. So all machines, whenever you give your model to a machine, the machine will give you complete features that this is a time required. This is the weight of the filament or powder. For example, in our metal printer, it tells us that this much time it will take, this much weight is required, and in your store, in the, you can say what you call as a chamber where the powder is stored, at least this much of powder must be there. It is not that if I require a 5 gram of powder, then 5 gram of powder sufficient. The chamber must be sufficiently filled. So you can say it has to be charged up to a certain extent. So after that, this is a screenshot of the settings that what is the infill extruder. So primary extruder, what is the infill density? For example, shown here 10%, overlap 15%, infill, yeah, flow rate. Flow rate is 100-fold flow rate. Then infill pattern type, grid, rectilinear, honeycomb, triangle, cubic, so much, so on, so forth. So after the settings are done, then the printing is started. So what I'm showing you here is two patterns. One is rectilinear and the other is the concentric. So in rectilinear, the head will move like this as I'm moving my mouse pointer. And rectilinear, it will move in concentric. Circles are not necessarily circles, but it may be circles or squares, but concentric twice. So before we proceed further, let us see the actual video of this part being manufactured, both for rectilinear as well as for the concentric motions. So this is the part. This was just an additional part. So this is the shell. Now it is making the shell, the inner parts of the shell, again the shell. So once the head starts moving inside, you will be able to see. Now this is the rectilinear motion. So there is an air gap, or you can say there is a gap between two consecutive lines, which are being drawn here or which are being made here. So rectilinear motion inside. The shell will always be completely solid. So how the head is to move or how the bed is to move, so this is decided by the slicing software when the machine code is generated. Now here the same thing made using a concentric infill pattern. So right now the shell being built. Now it is moving inside in a concentric fashion. So you can see the layer being added. So the whole thing is being made in a concentric fashion, right? Okay. So the just like when we talk of composites, the orientation of the fibers can affect the mechanical property. So similarly, the infill pattern also affects the mechanical properties. Now these are some of the 3D printed parts. So what was done? 81 such parts were made. So because you can have PLA in multiple colors, so it is simply the color is different. Some parts were made using the red filament, some using the blue filament. Otherwise, it is all PLA only. So here you can see this is the base, and this is the square cavity. Here it is a cylindrical cavity, and here there are two protrusions, one again square shape and the other one cylindrical shape. So after the 81 parts were made, then their dimensional accuracy was to be checked experimentally. So the required parameters were these. That square cavity should have side 1 as 8 mm and side 2 as 8 mm. Cylindrical cavity, the diameter of the cylindrical cavity should be 8 mm. Similarly, for the solid square protrusion, these should be the sides 5 and 5, and height should be 10 mm. So for solid cylindrical protrusion, and for the base cuboid. Then the dimensions were very accurately measured using a machine vision system in our laboratory. So the machine that you saw, this machine is not in our laboratory, the 3D printed machine that is available in Chandigarh College of Engineering and Technology. Well, as I said, that my co-supervisor from that college just across the road from our institute. So after the parts were built there, their dimensions were measured in our laboratory using the this machine vision system. It is basically it has a CCD camera, and there is a base, and the motors are there, and these are very sophisticated motors. So you place the component, you can see it placed over here. So once the component is placed, the motors are moved, and the CCD camera, it captures the object. So you can change you can capture its images by keeping it in one way, and then change the orientation, then capture more images. And there is an image processing software which will give us accurate dimensions. So we also use this machine for even wearing flank wear of cutting tools. But so using this, the sides were made. Now what you see here is that the input parameters, a full factorial design was used. The input parameters, and then square cavity, 8 mm by 8 mm is required. But what we get for this combination, we get a side one of 8.133 mm and this one of 8.168 mm. So similarly, for a cylindrical cavity, this is the dia that we get instead of the 8 mm required. So now we have the data with us. Ultimately, when we talk of machine learning, what we are trying to do is, it is essentially regression and classification only. But of course, like there are the simplest regression you can call as a least square error method. So where we try to fit a curve to a data so that the sum of the squares of the error is minimum. So, but now with the machine learning, so we have now algorithms available which are more sophisticated than least square error, least square sum error. So, and then we have software available in which we don't have to write the code to make the algorithm. The algorithms are available on the net, and then you can implement them. So, like for example, we use MATLAB, but MATLAB is expensive. So because our institute has a license of MATLAB with all the toolboxes up to the year 2023, So we use it in our teaching and in our research. But since now Python is open source software, freely available, and it gives you almost all the features which any commercial software will give, whether it is machine learning, deep learning, or even you can say signal processing or image processing. Now a lot of people are shifting to Python. So we are also encouraging our students to use Python in their research work, so that uh, we are, because it's open source software, it's free, so it makes sense to use that. Now here you are seeing say 11 rows of data, but so there were 81 rows of data that also I will show you. So let me show you. Okay. So here what we are showing you is the 81 rows of data for the square cavity. So the first parameter is the infill pattern. It could be lines, rectilinear or concentric, then layer thickness, infill density, print speed, and these two are the outputs. So we will call these first four parameters as data and these two parameters as labels. So this file is saved as a CSV file, that is a what is called as a comma separated value file, which you can open in Excel. But in Python you can have say data from Excel or a CSV file or from a SQL database. But here we are using a comma separated values file. So here this is the complete data, whereas here we have shown you, sorry, partly the data in the PPT. Okay. Now we switch from 3D printing to machine learning. So machine learning is a field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. So this definition was given by Arthur Samuel in 1959. Otherwise, we can say if you talk of AI or artificial intelligence, it dates back to Second World War, when Alan Turing, he first made a machine which was able to decipher the codes of German coding machine that was called Enigma. And there is also a very famous experiment, Turing experiment, that which Alan Turing conducted, and in which he had a computer in one room and a person in the other room, and both are interacting. So if the person is not able to know that I am talking with a, or I am typing and exchanging message with a computer, then obviously the computer has the intelligence which a person is supposed to have. But of course, when we say AI, it doesn't mean that a computer will know everything. Ultimately, as a humans also, our intelligence depends upon two things. One is the information or the data that we have. Second is our logical ability to you can say deduce or to come to a inference using that data. The same thing is true for the computers also. So machine learning allows the computers to learn automatically without human intervention or assistance and adjust actions accordingly. So with a large and reliable training data sets, machine learning algorithm helps to predict the values and provide recommendations to optimize part quality and process design. So here we are just showing you a relationship between AI and machine learning. So AI is the broader field. So that is a science to build intelligent programs and machines that can creatively solve problems, which has always been considered a human prerogative, which humans are able to do. So machine learning is a subset of AI that provides systems the ability So that means it's a tool to automatically learn and improve from experience without being explicitly programmed. Now within in the diagram, within this machine learning circle is shown the neural nets. There are so many techniques which are used in machine learning. So neural nets is one of them. And within neural networks, then we have the deep learning. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning which uses the neural networks having a structure that is similar to human neurons. So of course, in this work that I am presenting you, the supervised learning was used, and some deep learning was not used. And but these are the important words nowadays, that is machine learning, deep learning. So that is why we have included this in our presentation. So in a traditional programming, what we do is we have the computer to which we give some data and we give some rules, typically in the form of if statements. And based upon the data and the logic, the computer can give us answers. However, when we talk of machine learning approach, we give the computer the data and the answers, and it gives us some rules or logic, or you can say it gives us answer, because we can generate rules also. But typically what we do is, at machine learning level, I am saying, at AI level we can say that we are generating rules or logic, but at machine learning level what we do is we have some algorithms available, so we make use of those algorithms, and to those algorithms we give the data and the answers, and those algorithms can then make a pattern, or you can say fit the data. They can make a model, and using that model then we can make use of that model for predicting the outputs. So instead of writing a program, many examples are collected that specify the correct output for a given input. A machine learning algorithm then takes these examples and produces a program or a model, you can say, that does the job. So if we talk of the machine learning recipe, it starts with probability, statistics, linear algebra, calculus, then algorithms. So many algorithms are available these days. So we can classify them broadly into three categories: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. So in supervised, these are some names which I have mentioned here. So in this work, we have made use of regression and decision trees. Unsupervised is k-means clustering, the principal component analysis, or singular value decomposition, etc. Reinforcement is genetic algorithm, which is very common name, Q-learning, etc. And neural network is also a supervised learning. And then once we have the programming ability, then we can do this. And moreover, now the main thing here is that the data is so large. Typically, in our example, it's only 81 rows of data, which a computer can do in a blink of an eye. But when we talk of large data, it may take days and weeks. So for that, we need to have what is known as GPU workstations. For example, here also in the lab, we have GPU workstations, so which are used by our mechanical students, our computer science students, and students from other departments also. So they will just put the data, run the algorithms, and it may keep on running for 10 days, 12 days, and they work like that. Now, the first thing is required for machine learning is a data set. So a data set is a large repository of structured data which involves information of all relevant features. A well-structured data is the most important parameter for any machine learning algorithm because the quality and quantity of data directly determine the accuracy of predictive model. So in this work, three supervised algorithms were used: polynomial regression, decision trees, and random forest. So random forest is basically you can say ensemble or a collection of decision trees, where you use more than one decision tree to find a program. So I'm just giving you a address of a website where you can go and learn machine learning in Python step by step. So typically many websites or many books, if they are teaching machine learning in Python, they use a data which is called iris. So iris is basically a flower, And very interestingly, so it is it's a flower iris. And very interestingly, this data was made in 1935 or 36. It's a very old data. So it's there are three types of it. I don't remember the exact names. So there are, say, we can say I1, I2, I3. So here the scientist had collected the data of three types. That means it was based upon the width and the length of the petal of the flower and the width and length of the sepal. So there is 4 columns where the length and the breadth of the petal and the length and breadth of the sepal is given. And then the last column is the type of the iris flower, right? So if for this, what is the type? So this data is, it's available on the net. So I'm given that address also, because this is being recorded. So it will be this session will be available to you after the course is over. Then programming language used is Python. So it is free and open source, object oriented, high level. So high level means that we don't have to work like in assembly or a machine code. So it's an interpreted language. That means you don't compile the program. The program is interpreted line by line as it is executed. It is portable. You may have a program made on the Windows and same will run on Unix or Linux. Not all, but many programs. Then large number of libraries, which are important things, which are freely available on the internet. And then it's a dynamically typed language. Dynamic typed means that you can say the memory allocation is dynamic in nature, so which is efficient. So just I will just take 2-3 minutes just to drive home that when we say machine learning, what we actually mean. So I've just taken an example of a Taylor's tool life equation, which is the cutting velocity, the tool life raised to a exponent. We know it is equal to constant. Or we can say if we have a cutting velocity V1 known to us and the corresponding tool life known to us, and another tool life or a cutting velocity known to us, the exponent known to us, then we can find the second tool life. Now let us say when you are working on a machine or a CNC machine, turning or milling, whatever. So you can, how do you know what is N? So you can conduct the experiments. You can, of course, for a given material and a given insert, given workpiece material and also given tool material. So this will be true for this. So we can conduct the experiments. We can take the cutting parameters, leaving the depth of cut and the feed rate aside. So if we give us, of course we keep them constant. So we give a certain cutting velocity and we note down what is the tool life in minutes. You keep on measuring the flank wear and then using some benchmark that once the flank wear is this much, it's no longer usable. And then you can conduct it at a different velocity, cutting velocity, and measure the tool life for that. So if you have just 2 datas, you can equate them. So you can just simply you can find out what is N. For example, you may say T1 by T2, N is equal to V2 by V1, or you can take log. If the depending upon these values, you may have to take a log. So then you can have N log of T2 by T1 is equal to log of V2 by V1, and then you can find the value of N. So you will get some value of N. Now you can give it a third value of velocity, and then you can predict that okay, what will be the tool life. But this n may not come at very accurately if you have just two sets of values. So you may have maybe 10 sets of values, and then using them you can find different values of n and then take an average value of n. So ultimately it is basically driving some inference from the data. And once you have n which you think is sufficiently accurate, then you can use this equation to predict the tool life for a given cutting velocity. So there are those kind of things. If you do on the paper, it takes time, but if we have data available with us, from experimental data is available with us, using a program or using a simple tool like Excel can do, it'd be very easy for us. So Excel can help you to some extent, but when the data is very large, the system is complex, then we use machine learning algorithms. So I am just here showing you, we're not discussing Python here, but showing you a program for tool life written in Python. So here what we are doing, we are using a input statement and asking the user to enter velocity 1 and guiding the user that it should be in meter per minute. So we are using an input statement, then a float function to convert the input into a number and storing it in the variable v1. Then similarly we ask the user to enter the tool life for that particular velocity and we store it in t1. Then similarly we take the second velocity and the second tool life, store them in v2 and v1, and then we use the same formula that I used in the previous screen, that log of v1 by v2 upon log of t2 by t1. Okay. Now here we are using a function log. So if we use Python, Python doesn't have an inbuilt function log. So what we do, we make use of a library. So when we say freely libraries are available, that's what we mean. So once you install Python, if you are a new user, if you install Python, it's available freely on the net. You can go to python.org and download the latest version. It's 3.9 something nowadays. Then along with Python, another program is called pip, P-I-P. Pip will automatically get installed, and using pip you can then download different libraries from the internet, and pip will download and install them, configure them for use with Python. So math is one such library, but some libraries like math or some other ones, they are automatically downloaded, which are very frequently used. But some of the libraries which we have used in this program, in this work, they had to be downloaded separately. So once you have the library, from that library, then you say .log. That means this function is belonging to this library. So math.log v1 by v2 is equal to math.log this. So here we have determined n. So once we have determined n, then we ask the user, okay, enter a tool life in minutes for which cutting velocity is to be found. So the user enters the tool life, or we could do it vice versa. We could ask him to give a cutting velocity and we would have found the tool life. And so then we simply use the formula that here we are using a formula POW, that is power, which is also again in the math library. And then we tell the user this is the cutting velocity which you should use if you want this much of tool life. So we have a little bit time, so I can just it won't take much time. So I can just run this program. So what you are seeing on the screen is right now is the Python interface, and this is the program that I just showed you in the PPT. So I can simply run it. I say run module. So it says enter velocity 1. If I say 8 meter per minute, and then maybe tool life was in minutes, it is asking. So maybe the tool life was 35 minutes. And if I'm running it at a higher velocity, then maybe the tool life decreased to 20 minutes. So now it has determined the n, the exponent. So it says enter tool life in minutes for which cutting velocity is to be found. So if I say I want that my tool should run for say at least 45 minutes, then it says okay, then don't use a cutting velocity more than 6.67 meter per minute. So let's go back to our presentation. So just like I showed you the math library in this work. So sorry, in the previous slide. So here I am showing you the libraries which were used in the present work. What is sklearn, pandas, matplotlib, and numpy. So I will also give you a glimpse into how it is done. So sklearn is for data pre-processing and machine learning algorithms. Pandas is for data structuring analysis. Matplotlib is for plotting. And NumPy is for array operations. So when we say data pre-processing, what do we mean? So let us go back to our Excel file. So let me increase its. Now here, what we have is we have the data, because whenever we want to process data should be in numeric form. But here we have a data which is not in numeric form, but it is in the form of text. So we must convert it into text form. So for example, what I can do is that I have 4 columns of data. So I'll repeat, when I say data, I mean the input data. Output, I will use the word label. So I have 4 fields for the data: infill pattern, layer thickness, infill density, and print speed. Now as far as layer thickness, infill density, and print speed are concerned, that is okay, that is numeric. So we will convert the infill pattern. So what I want is, I want that instead of 4 columns, I will have 7 columns of 6 columns of data. How 6 columns? What we will do is here, as you have seen, we have made 6 columns. Now this is layer thickness, infill density, and print speed. So layer thickness is like for 0.1, infill density 20, 20, then 50, print speed 50, 60, 70, like that. So for the first column, we have converted it into 3 columns, that is concentric, lines, rectilinear. So if my first data is basically lines, as you saw it was lines, so what I'll do, I'll put a 0 for concentric, 1 for lines, and 0 for rectilinear. Then the next data was for rectilinear, 0.1 mm layer thickness, 20% infill density, and 50 millimeter per second the print speed. So here what I will do, I'll put 1 under rectilinear, 0 under lines, and 0 under concentric. So the number of rows will remain same, but here we will add some columns. Now if we don't do it manually actually, because here it was only 81 rows of data. You could do it manually, but if you have 1,000 or 1 lakh lines of data, or maybe 1 billion lines of data, so how do you do it? Then again, there are inbuilt functions are there. For example, here I'm showing you a sample code for this program. So here what we have done, where we have imported these. The library is sklearn. Within sklearn, there is a sub-library pre-processing. From pre-processing, we have imported you can say a function, one hot encoder. Similarly, in the second line also, from sklearn and from compose sub-library, we have imported something called column transformer. Then what we are doing here, and yes, we have also imported pandas. Pandas is again a library. When we say as PD, it is just a nickname. So I could write here as P also, so that when I use it in my program, I don't have to write pandas again and again. I will just write, for example, here I have written pd.read CSV. So PD is the nickname for the pandas library, and this library contains a function read CSV, that is read a comma separated value file. So for the scare cavity data which I was showing you here, so where is this file lying? This file is lying in iDrive in the Python library folder. So this is the name of the file. So we just give the name of the file, and this function will read this file, and that the data will be transferred to a variable now, which is data set 1. So after that, here we have used these 3 lines to do that 101 thing. So we have converted the first column into 3 columns, and then in this statement we are simply giving the column headers, because this column header was not there. So infill pattern concentric, that is infill pattern line, infill pattern sorry, here should be rectilinear, then layer thickness, density, print speed, then the label side 1 and side 2. So this we can do. So here in this slide, what you are seeing is this data that was done for that, right? So once it is done, then it is to be given to a algorithm. Now, how do we give it to a algorithm? So in this program again, now I'm trying to show you how easy it is. So once we have, first we read the whole data of the file into data set 1, and then we converted that data set 1 into a different format, and we called it data set 2. So after that, there just 2 lines of codes are there. So what we are doing, that we are using a function, it's again from pandas only, right? ilog function from data frame. So ilog function, here what we are doing, we are now separating it into 2 parts. Separating 2 parts, which 2 parts? Now I want because my data is input data. So the first column, second column, third column, fourth column, fifth column, and sixth column. So I am going to make a table which will consist of only these 4 columns, and then a separate table for, let us say, side 1, because we have to make predictions separately for side 1 and separately for side 2. For here side 1, side 2, the input data will be same. So in Python, you label the columns or the rows. The index starts with 0. So this is my column number 0, column number 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and this is column 6. So what we are doing here is that we are saying here, this means all rows, and this is 0 to 5. This is again a syntax of Python. If you write 0 to n, it picks the columns 0 to n minus 1. So we are picking the column 0 to 5 basically, and here we are picking the 6th column. Now this is also a standard convention in Python, just a convention, that the data is called X, data means input data, and the label or the response is called small y. This is from in mathematics, right? Y is equal to f of x. From there the convention has been taken. Now, but x is taken as capital. Even if I take small x, the program will run fine. So why I'm saying is, why it is taken as capital? Because this data will not be a scalar, it will be a matrix. And normally in mathematics, you must have noticed, we represent matrices as capital letters. And although this technically will here also be a matrix, but it will it's a scale, it's a, you can say, a row vector or a column vector, so we are representing it as a small y. So after we do that, then we have to separate, we have to arbitrarily pick up some data for training purposes and some for testing purposes. So here we are using a function, inbuilt function, train test split. So what is the train test split? You can see here from this fifth line, again the library is sklearn, the sub library is model selection, and we have imported a function train test split. So the train test split will automatically split this capital X into two parts, say X train and X test. Now these are just variable names, I can give it any name, X1, X2 also is okay. And Y also in two parts, Y train and Y test. So if I give this function, it will by default pick 75% of data for training, 25% for testing. And when it does so, based on random number, not that first 75% rows will be picked up, but so that random state 0 is given is that we say that okay, because you know when computers, when we generate random numbers, if we give a seed, then we give a seed value. So here we are saying that you giving a seed value kind of thing. So once that is done, so what we'll do is you will use X train data and Y train label to train the model, and then X test data and Y test label to test the model. So basically, so what we do here is next line is we are using a function linear regression. This also you can see we have imported. So we are not writing practically any code. Everything is available on the net. Just download it and use it. The only thing is you have to learn how to download it and how to use it. So this we have given it a kind of a nickname, Lin, and then we use the function fit from this. So this fit is for linear fit. I told you that in our work we have used polynomial regression. Here I am showing you linear regression. So we are giving it X train and Y train data. Using this, the fitting will be done, and then I'm just printing a message training complete so that after the program is done. So let us just, it will take hardly a minute. So let us just run the code. I'll just go to run and say run module. So now the code is running in the background, and within a few seconds, okay, the training is complete, but the data set was very small. So out of 81%, 75%, out of 81 rows of data, 75% was taken. That means 60 rows were taken. Now once it is complete, now, and also because I have run the program, so all these libraries now in the memory of my computer. So I can use a function predict from Lin only to see that okay, for X test what is the output. So X test is also there. First of all, I can see what is my X test. I will just type the name underscore. So this is the here you will be able to see these are 21 rows. So this is one row. So maybe this is I think, what was the format? Yeah, concentric, pattern, and rectilinear. Fine. So here it is not concentric is 0, rectilinear is 0. So this is made by using linear pattern. Then 0.1 is the layer thickness, 50% is the infill density, and 60 millimeter per second is the this is the print speed. So this is within square brackets, you can see this is one set of data. So similarly, you will see there are 21 of these data sets which were used for the kept aside for testing purposes. So here the label is not there that what is side X1 or side 2, because in this program I have only used side 1. So how do we know we have used side 1? Here we will see. You see my side 1 is the column number 6. So I have in Y I have given column, so it's a side 1 only. So I just say here len dot predict, and then I tell what is the test data. So I give this x underscore test. So corresponding to this, it will give me predictions that, okay, for the first set of data, the dimension is 8.171, 8.168, so 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 fours are 20 and 21 outputs it has given me. So now these are the outputs that the program has given me. So I can now compare them with my experimentally measured side one. I have to see first of all which what are the test data, match them. And so once we have this predicted data here, you can say predicted side one predicted. I can compare this value with this value and then find the error in the prediction. Okay. So after this, so this is the flow chart. I have practically showed you the program here. So here, so the flow chart was that import scikit-learn, numpy, pandas, matplotlib. So I have shown you the program we have imported. Then we have read the CSV file. Then you can declare input variables. We don't need to declare separately also. You can just start using them. And then output variables. Then read input and output variables. And we have done that. Then data pre-processing. What we did was that one hot encoder we used to convert that text data into numeric data. And then here's a splitting data set into 80-20 ratio. So you can change that ratio also. The default ratio is 75-25. So here the students split into 80-20. And then in the example, I showed you only linear regression by using linfit, by using linear regression function. So there a polynomial regression, decision tree and random forest were used, and then their training was then done, and then the error was found for all different, and then that error was then summarized by using a root mean square error. So what we show here is, so these are the for test data. So this is the actual data, test data. This is the predicted data. So this is for cylindrical cavity. So cylindrical cavity, we had only one parameter, one output parameter, that is the dia of the cavity. And then the error is calculated. So what we show here is a plot for reading number. So you can see the reading number is from 1 to 17, because now 80-20 percentage was used. So for 81 rows of data, 20% means 16 or 17. So the system took 17 for the test data and the remaining for the training data. So for the first value, these three plots are for, blue one is for polynomial regression, green for decision tree, and red for random forest. So here it shows that this is the zero line, right? This is the error, positive, negative error. So here it shows that for first reading, decision tree is giving the error nearest to 0, the red line. Okay. For the second value, polynomial regression is giving the least error. For the third value, random error is giving the least error. So if we look for each set of data, the error may be less or least by a different algorithm. But then we have to see the overall picture. So for that purpose, root mean square error was calculated. And we also know why do we take care of error. So by doing that, because if we simply add the errors, then some errors are positive, some are negative, and so we may get a 0 error and we may be fooled that the error is 0. But once we scare the error, then the negative also become positive, so then all of them are added, then we take their square root. So this plot shows, but in any case the error was not much in terms of its maximum is 3 on the positive side and almost minus 2.8 on the negative side. So this is for the cylindrical cavity. So cylindrical cavity had only one dimension. So if we talk of sphere cavity, it had two dimensions. So this is for one dimension, this is for second dimension. Then for the protrusion, cylindrical protrusion. So this is for the diameter and this is for the height. Then for the sphere protrusion, so this is for the side 1, side 2, and this is for the height. And then the base, side 1, side 2, and side 3. So we have errors, but ultimately then we combine them to have an overall picture. So we can see we take a root mean square error. So on the here we have sphere cavity, cylindrical cavity, solid sphere protrusion, solid cylindrical protrusion, and base cuboid. So for polynomial regression, what was the RMSE? For decision tree, what was RMSE? For random forest, what was RMSE? So we will see for almost all features for this case, polynomial regression gave the least error. Here also, only here the decision tree gave an overall error which was slightly lesser than the polynomial regression, and this is also lesser than the polynomial regression. So here decision tree performed best, and again here again it is the, so overall we can say that polynomial regression has served the purpose of you can say predicting the overall error. So we can say that supervised machine learning algorithms predicted the dimensions for FDM fabricated parts with high accuracy. The prediction error for all the 3 ML models was within the limit of ±4% for all the dimensional features of FDM fabricated parts. And polynomial regression was the best fit model for predicting dimensional accuracy of FDM fabricated parts using PLA material. So friends, with that I come to an end. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to interact. So if there is any question you can ask or you can type in the chat box.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Suraj Vishwas. I am talking from the Bhubaneswar, Odisha.
Yes,
Sir,
please.
I have attended your full presentation. I am very much excited to. Actually, is there any opportunity to talk? Means, is there any opportunity to work with you? As right now, I am having my post graduation in mechanical designing, tool designing. So, further, is there an opportunity to work with you so that I can really learn from you?
Well, friend, you are most welcome. Only thing is we have to see how to work together, and I think nowadays because everything is happening in online mode, so maybe through some Google Meet you can we can have some session if you want. You can just send me an email.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So there's another question. Is deep learning subset of neural network? Yes, sir. Deep learning is a subset of neural network. So as I showed you in that slide also. Yeah. So any other query, friends, you can type or you can speak.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. This is Ishwaraya Billu from Sri Venkateswara College of Engineering, Tirupati, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sir, we are going to use Python programming. Other than Python programming, can we use any other software, sir?
Well, yes, you can use any one. Python is basically free, right? But if you know some other language, for example, okay, so in which programming language do you work? Mr. Aishwarya, which is the language that you, are you using any programming language for some purposes?
Sir, no, sir. For the theoretical purpose, only I am asking, sir.
Okay, no, I am saying that presently, are you using any programming language for any purpose, not for machine learning, but for any purpose, I am saying.
Yes, sir. We are using that CAD tools, some other CA programs, all these things.
I'm sorry, you said CAD tools? Did you say
Yes, sir.
CAD?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So by CAD tools, you mean some CAD designing software like maybe SolidWorks or CATIA or some Creo, right? So, but here we'll need some programming language. And if you are not using, the best to start is Python, because Python is free of cost.
Okay, sir.
And all the functions that are required is are available freely. And I think somebody has just typed a message that is that in future Python get more important? Of course, you see, because as I said, Python is free and Python has a very large community which is using it. So what you have is that it is being used not only for machine learning, for so many other things it is being used. So Python has the future. Another question, can we develop a mathematical model using deep learning for optimized method like neural networks? Sir, when we say mathematical model, so of course you can do, like for example, if you are, leave this aside, if otherwise you are doing some experiment and then you are using, after DOE you use the ANOVA and then you get a regression model. That is also a mathematical model. So here also you can create a regression model. The thing is that you have different algorithms available using which you can create a predict it. Because when we say mathematical model, we mean we are making an equation. So if we are making an equation, like when we do curve fitting, we make an equation. It may be a linear, it may be a quadratic, it may be of a higher degree polynomial. So one thing is that, so once you have made an equation, then you can put the values and get the response from that. But when we are talking of say the functions available in Python, like the regression models or the random forest or the k-means for unsupervised learning, there we get the predicted response. There we don't get it in the form of a regression model. Yeah. So which one is easier, Python, Scilab, MATLAB? So if you are starting from scratch, then I think anyone can be easier. But since MATLAB is basically a paid software, so installation wise or maybe using wise, it may be easier, because we also use MATLAB because we have paid MATLAB with us. So if I have to make a choice between MATLAB and Python, I will choose MATLAB because everything is available with me, and coding may be a little bit easier. Coding is similarly easier in Python also, not much difference in coding. The only thing is you have to look for the right libraries that are available, download them and use them. The Scilab is again free, but if you have to choose between free software, then I will prefer Python as compared to Scilab. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for some very nice comments that some participants have written. So, so Manisha, I think we can stop now. It is 1:30 already, so time for the lunch break. Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much.
friends. Thank you, one and all. So now we will have next session at 2:30 p.m. Dr. Rajkumar from IIT Kanpur will be presenting his talk. Okay. Thanks once again.